Did you know that ancient Egyptians loved anyone under 4 feet tall? Yeah, and if you were a Carthaginian child, you'd be sacrificed to the gods. These are some of the craziest untold stories of ancient civilizations. First off, the ancient Chinese loved getting high. Back in the day, over 2,500 years ago, the ancient Chinese were into something surprising: getting high with cannabis. And we're not talking about just any old plant here. Researchers digging around in the Jerzangal cemetery found some interesting stuff. The residue they found in ancient pipes had way more THC than the wild cannabis growing nearby. Back then, people grew the strongest kinds of cannabis for its mind-altering effects. But that's not all. Turns out, a bunch of the people buried there weren't from around those parts. That means the Pamir Mountains might have been part of the ancient trade network, kind of like the Silk Road. And guess what might have been traded along the way? Yep, you guessed it, cannabis. So it seems like the ancient Chinese were way ahead of their time when it came to enjoying some herbal enlightenment. That's still kinda chill, but this next civilization was absolutely crazy. The Sican people painted with blood. So way before the mighty Incas ruled the land, there was a lesser-known culture called the Sican, chilling out in Peru for more than 500 years. In the 1900s, archaeologists stumbled and found an ancient Sican tomb tucked away for over a millennium. Inside, an upside-down skeleton painted head to toe in vibrant red cinnabar. But wait, it gets weirder. Now here's where things take a spooky turn. The archaeologists noticed something seriously creepy about the dude's skull. It had been neatly chopped off and was now rocking a shiny gold mask, also painted in that eerie red cinnabar. How did the paint manage to stick around for so long? But in 2021, experts at Oxford University cracked the case wide open. They discovered the long-lasting paint was actually human blood. The Sican were mixing human blood with egg whites to make their paint. And get this, they believed that using human blood somehow tied into the idea of reincarnation. Yikes! But wait, who would have thought marigold could be more than just a pretty flower? Well, the ancient Mayans sure did. Turns out, even though marigold won't give you that heady high, the Maya were puffing away on it. How do we know? Well, archaeologists dug up some clay pots the Maya used as tobacco containers over 1,000 years ago and decided to do a little testing. And guess what they found? Marigold alongside not one, but 2 types of tobacco. Now, why would the Maya do such a thing? Nobody's quite sure yet, but it's a safe bet they weren't just decorating their pots. They were probably using marigolds to jazz up the flavor of their tobacco. And if you thought ancient flavored cigarettes sound crazy, you're not prepared for this next one. Hey, did you know that gun control isn't exactly a modern concept? Yep, even in Greece, they had some strict rules about who could carry weapons and where. In ancient Greece, carrying weapons in public was a big no-no. Even if you were a warrior, showing off your sword was like challenging everyone around you. Take Charondas, for example, a Greek Sicilian senator who forgot to leave his dagger at home. When he realized his mistake, he didn't hesitate to take his own life, showing how seriously Greeks took their rules. For them, the law always came before weapons, believing that when weapons rule, the law dies. Keeping swords under control was a matter of survival. But this next civilization actually had an interesting secret. The ancient Egyptians had a special place in their hearts for dwarves. Back in 2005, a study in the American Journal of Medical Genetics revealed something pretty cool. In ancient Egypt, dwarves were like VIPs. Yeah, going all the way back to 4500 BCE. These pint-sized folks were treated with major respect. How do we know? Well, researchers dug through tons of ancient stuff. Paintings, tombs, statues, you name it. And guess what? They found loads of pictures showing dwarves doing important stuff, like managing fancy linens, bling, and even grooving on the dance floor. But here's the thing, these little guys weren't just doing ordinary jobs. They were holding top positions, and some even got fancy burial spots in the royal cemetery. So being a dwarf in Egypt wasn't seen as a problem. It was actually something to be proud of. This next ancient society had a pretty intense way of living though. The Minoans were big on being warriors. You might have pictured the Minoans as peaceful, but think again. These ancient folks weren't afraid to fight when they needed to. The Minoan civilization ruled the roost around 3000 BCE and stuck around for a whopping 2,000 years, until disappearing around 1100 BCE. Yep, that's right, 2,000 years of Minoan history. Now here's where it gets interesting. While people used to think of them as peace-loving hippies, recent research has flipped that idea on its head. It turns out they were no strangers to a good old battle. Archaeologists from the University of Sheffield dug up evidence showing warfare was a big part of Minoan culture. And get this, they were the OG warriors, shaping weapons used all across Europe during the Middle Ages. So next time you hear about the Minoans, remember, they were fierce fighters with a legacy lasting a millennia. So that was surprising, but here's one crazy revelation that not many people know about. You know how we're often told that the fall of Rome in 476 CE was the end of the line for the mighty empire? Well, as it turns out, that's not exactly the whole story. Sure, when the city got overrun by those German Vandals, it seemed like the end of an era. But in reality, Rome's power had already taken a back seat to Ravenna, the new kid on the block in terms of Western Empire capitals. And here's where things get even more interesting. When the last Western Roman emperor got the boot from the Gothic general Odoacer, it wasn't some catastrophic upheaval. Nope, Odoacer wasn't out to turn the world upside down. He just wanted to call the shots himself. He made sure the authorities over in Constantinople still got their due respect, keeping things pretty much business as usual. For the average Roman, life carried on pretty much unchanged for decades after the empire's supposed fall. Why? Because those so-called barbarians who took the reins, think Ostrogoths, Goths, and Germans, had been hanging around the Roman scene for ages. They were part of the military. They paid their dues as quasi-citizens, and heck, some of them were even Roman clients. When a mix of Romans and barbarians teamed up to give those pesky Huns a run for their money in 451 CE, it became downright tricky to tell who was who. So when it all boils down, the Roman Empire didn't crumble because of some big bad foreign invasion. Nope, it was a messy series of civil wars that finally brought the empire to its knees. Finally, you wouldn't believe the debate that's been raging about this next civilization. It's over whether the ancient Carthaginians were into child sacrifice or not. Seriously, scholars have been going back and forth on this one for ages. Back in the 12th century, folks from Italy and Tunisia were spreading the word that, hey, maybe the Carthaginians weren't as bad as everyone thought. They blamed the Greeks and the Romans for spreading nasty rumors about them. Their argument? Those places called Tefets, where people found the remains of kids, weren't sites of child sacrifice, but just regular old cemeteries for children. But hold on a second. Recent research proved that theory wrong. According to these experts, there's a mountain of evidence. We're talking literary texts, historical records, you name it, pointing to the fact that, yep, the Carthaginians were indeed sacrificing their own children to the gods. It's a pretty grim picture, but it just goes to show how deep the mysteries of ancient civilizations can run, from the ancient Chinese getting high to the Sican people painting with blood. Ancient civilizations are getting up to all kinds of crazy things. But we're not done yet. Click on the next video to uncover more astonishing secrets from the passages of history.